Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
Though a bird can't fly, that doesn't mean it never will. By Phalanx. What might have been if Kuina had survived her fall down the dojo stairs? She and Zoro strive to become the greatest swordsman in the world, allegiances and promises notwithstanding. Adios.
The old shipwright was not amused as he watched the Stan Malay pull into the shipyards, if such a phrase could be used to describe the shuddering movement of the once proud ship that was one hull breach short of a wreck. Marines these days, bringing their ships back in such conditions, he complained. What the hell do they think they're playing at? Having finally reached Navarone and then granted permission to dock at last, the poor flagship was truly in a state. As the gangplank went down and crew started filing out, the dock hands noted that her crew didn't look much better either. Fortunately, the Stan Malay's companion ships, being smaller and more maneuverable, had fared better in the hailstorm and would only need minor repairs. "That's one beat-up archipelago," a young Marine commented with a whistle. He had just arrived at the shipyards from the main base. "Hey there, Macau-san." "Oh, it's you, Petty Officer Piers." The wizened old man looked up from the pile of lumber he had been sitting on. "What are you doing down here?" "Commander Jonathan sent me here to meet someone from the Stan Malay." "Who would that be?" CPO, a senior seaman, who was busy supervising the evacuation of the wounded, asked. "We had a bunch of casualties and Captain Tenzo put me in charge of tracking the roster." "Well, it's kind of like this. I used to be posted in another crew and he was like kind of one of my commanding officers, but then I got critically injured while on duty in Alabasta and got posted to G8 to recuperate, and so that's how I got temporarily reassigned and separated from my crew." The seaman was giving Piers a very bored and harassed stare. It's Warrant Officer Briggs," Piers finished quickly. "You mean Commander Briggs? The special investigator from HQ?" the other seaman asked, suddenly considerably more interested. "Yep, that's him." "Wait, Officer Briggs is a commander now? Cool, where is he?" The harassed look returned to the seaman's face. "I'm not sure, sir. He hasn't been seen since we arrived." "Huh? Is he missing?" "No, nothing like that. Commander Briggs was uninjured, I believe. And he seems very, capable. It's just that, well, when we got hit by the storm, Captain Tenzo was injured and Commander Briggs assumed command of the Stan Malay. But there was some argument between him and Commander Shepard, and I heard it got pretty bad." "Bad? That damn barkskin manhandled me." "Me? The rightful commanding officer of the vessel?" interrupted a nasal voice. The senior seaman paled at the sound. Piers looked up to see a scrawny man in purple suit and white officer's coat sneering from the gangplank. "I'll lodge a complaint. That glory-seeking bastard. Just you wait, Barkskin. You there? Are you the one who's supposed to greet me?" The man was looking down at Piers as though he was a sewer rat. It reminded the young Marine too much of Shelltown, and a certain unpleasant fop who, come to think of it, liked to wear those hideous purple suits too. No, I'm here to greet Inspector, Commander Briggs." "And just who exactly was supposed to be my guide?" demanded the commander. "Well, it's kind of like this. I used to be on the same crew as Commander Briggs, and Base Commander Jonathan thought he'd appreciate a familiar face on getting here, so he sent me along to meet him, but," Piers began. "I don't care." Commander Shepard looked beside himself with rage. "I suppose I can escort both of you to Commander Jonathan if Commander Briggs doesn't mind," Piers continued appeasingly. Commander Shepard did not seem mollified. In fact, he seemed quite insulted at the suggestion. "If Barkskin doesn't mind? You mean I have to share a guide with that big, stupid, jellyfish?" "No, jellyfish-spined stick insect." He wagged a finger for emphasis. "Forget it, I'll find my own way through this junkyard of a base." The commander finished with the ominous threat of getting everyone in the vicinity reassigned somewhere remote. As if any of the places he suggested could beat Shelltown, and then stalked off, disgust written in every line of his body. "Wow, he's unhappy," Piers said, turning back to the seaman, who was scowling after the commander. "Sorry, you were saying something about Commander Briggs." "Yes, he's not been seen since we docked. I swear he's not anywhere on the ship. I should know. I checked it myself when moving the wounded out. but no one remembers seeing him disembark. You mean he's disappeared? I wouldn't worry too much about Commander Briggs, Chief Petty Officer. A man, clad in a captain's uniform and with an arm in a sling, spoke from the top of the gangplank. If what I've heard about him is true, he's already gone off on his reconnaissance mission. Captain Tenzo, sir, both the seamen and peers saluted. At ease. Chief Petty Officer, since you're here and Commander Briggs does not require a guide, could I impose on you for directions to the medical bay? Piers took in the stretchers of wounded men and their captain's own battered condition, and made up his mind on the spot. I'll do better than that, Captain, sir. I'll escort you there myself. They've got Zoro. Usopp whispered in horror. He and Robin were at the outskirts of the Marine base. They had, in fact, been eavesdropping for news, and Usopp had nearly given himself away when a passing Marine patrol had divulged this morsel of very important information in their chatter. Well, I did think that it was unwise of Mr. Swordsman to try and take a hostage. I hope they do not try and execute him on the spot, Robin commented calmly, which only added to Usopp's rapidly growing panic. This is bad, they've got Mary, and now they've got Zoro. What do we do? What do we do? Where's Luffy, if he hears about this? I think we can leave Swordsman-san to the captain, Robin replied in a tone distinctly lacking in concern for the welfare of their crewmate. I am sure he will try for a rescue once he hears of the news. In the meantime, we should focus on what we can do on our own. Usopp, being very attached to the Going Merry, naturally decided to head for the docks to try and locate their ship. Robin decided to follow after him, but prudently took care to remain unseen. That was how she encountered a certain Commander Shepard in a deserted corridor, and how she managed to relieve him of his outfit and identity. She was never one to waste a good opportunity when it decided to come her way. Nami had thought that exchanging her custodian's outfit for a nurse's had been a stroke of genius. How was she to know that for some ridiculous reason, she would end up being stuck in a sickbay full of wounded Marines and a particularly inept doctor who seemed to faint at the very first glimpse of blood? Sure, she'd managed to meet up with Chopper again, but instead of being a help he was proving to be a hindrance by his obstinate devotion to being a doctor. While part of her did feel a little sorry for the wounded Marines, her mother having been one after all, Chopper's insistence on staying to help Dr. Kabato and treating them was too much. They were going to get themselves caught. Excuse me, miss, do you know where the spare wheelchairs are? We've got another group of wounded to evacuate from the ship and they'd really help. Nami quickly plastered on a smile and turned to face the Marine who had addressed her. Sure. They're right over there. She trailed off as she found herself face to face with the same strange Marine she had run into while with Zoro earlier. Even worse, she could tell by the widening of his eyes that he had recognized her too. What could she do about it before he raised the alarm? Knock him out like Zoro had done, then claim he had been inappropriate and copped a feel? No, that would draw too much attention and by extension, suspicion. Scream and accuse him of being a pirate? Oh no, that was an officer's uniform. Not going to work. They were so going to be caught. Just as she was going over alternative plans and cover stories, the Marine spoke again. Overam. There was a pause and Nami braced herself for her inevitable exposure. Please take care of the men. I've got to get back to helping the others now. I mean, we've got a lot to do. Like look for the rest of those pirates. You know, now that we've got Roronoa locked up in the prisons and all that. With that he saluted and quickly left. Nami stared after him in confusion. There was no doubt he hadn't bought her nurse disguise. She was a good judge of body language, and that Marine in particular was so transparent in his emotions that he was ridiculously easy to read. Yet he'd helped her keep her cover and even slipped her some news about her crewmates. She vaguely remembered Zoro saying something about the Marine helping them. Perhaps it was another old friend of his like the swordswoman they'd met in Alabasta? Nami shook her head. No time to wonder about that now. If she wanted to leave this place with Chopper anytime soon, they had surgeries to get through. She just hoped that Zoro was right and trusting that Marine wasn't going to get her captured like it had with him. Oh, come on Lieutenant, don't tell me you're falling for that rigmarole. There. I knew you were smarter than that, Briggs muttered to himself as he watched Lieutenant Drake apprehend the long-nosed pirate from Straw Hat Luffy's crew. Wandering around the docks, predictable. No bounty on that head as far as he was aware. As Briggs watched the familiar Marine officer drag the disguised pirate off, He could see why. Not quite the master of infiltration there, unlike Briggs' own quarry. It had been a surprise seeing a few familiar faces around the base. Fortunately, he was in his full insect form, which was almost as good as being invisible. Pseudo-invisibility was very convenient in this case. It meant not having to deal with awkward greetings and small talk from people he was sure would rather not be seen associating with him. Not after his disgrace, anyway. In his musings he failed to pay attention and walked right into a cobweb on the ceiling he was crawling along. Briggs swore. Maintenance had been lax in cleaning this part of the marine base. Apparently, the spider the webbing belonged to promptly scuttled out, expecting a meal. It got a little bit more than it bargained for. One blinded spider later, Briggs resumed his journey. During his tussle with the spider he'd lost sight of the lieutenant and his prisoner. He wasn't concerned. He had bigger fish to fry and he soon found traces of her handiwork. He couldn't help but chortle at the sight of Commander Shepard in his underclothes, left unconscious in the middle of a deserted passageway. Oh, that woman did have exquisite taste in picking targets. Briggs callously decided to leave him there. He had a mission to accomplish, and now that he knew what guise she had taken on, his job had been made so much easier. By the time Piers had finished with helping the crew of the Stan Malay move their wounded to the sick bay, it was lunchtime, so he headed for the dining hall. In G8, meals were considered sacrosanct and the doctors at the base had been particularly insistent that he watch his nutrition as he wasn't quite done with his recuperation even if he was back on duty. The rest of the Marines in the officers' mess were chatting about the exciting new menu the cooks from HQ had introduced. Piers, on the other hand, who had already had a long day, really didn't feel like talking for once. Eat up, and don't waste a single crumb. A plate of meatballs was plonked down before him by a new member of the kitchen staff. Piers thanked the man who had just served him and was about to tuck into his lunch when he made the mistake of looking up into the man's face. He promptly lost his appetite. Piers was East Blue through and through. He'd always wanted to go to the famous Bharati and try the food when he could afford it, so he recognized the new member of kitchen staff as Bharati's famous sous chef right away. He was left dumbstruck as the blonde chef with the swirly eyebrow walked back into the kitchen. The Straw Hat's cook was in the G8 kitchen. It took him several moments to calm down. There was no need to panic yet. It could still work. The cook knew what he was doing and looked like he belonged there. That made things easier. The girl was masquerading as a nurse in the infirmary. Mr. Zorro was still in the brig, but he would be safe there until the arrival of Commander Jonathan. Sir. The officers jumped to their feet and saluted as their commander entered the mess. At ease, men. Don't let me interrupt your lunch. The rest of the officers soon finished their meals and left, eager to get back to the hunt for the Straw Hats. You're quiet today, Piers. You all right? Piers jumped. Commander Jonathan was looking at him with concern on his face. The petty officer belatedly realized he'd left his food untouched and it was getting cold. There was no one else in the mess at the moment, so perhaps that was why the commander couldn't help but notice that Piers had been staring into space for a while. Piers, if you're still bothered by being taken hostage, remember that under the circumstances you did what you could to protect the others in this base. In that situation you have nothing to be ashamed of. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. Piers knew the commander was just being kind, but by doing that he had only ended up heaping coals of fire on Piers' own ungrateful, traitorous head. The squirming petty officer bolted down his food after that, eager to put some distance between him and the source of his overwhelming guilt. On his way out of the door, he almost bumped into the member of kitchen staff bringing in the commander's meal, who coincidentally enough, looked like Straw Hat Luffy. Even with the kitchen helper disguise it was obvious who he was. Piers remembered him very clearly from the climatic battle against Captain Morgan back in Shelltown. The infamous captain of the pirate crew wasn't even trying to be discreet. Worst of all, he was walking right into Commander Jonathan's room and the commander wasn't going to be fooled. Not the slightest bit. Piers put his head in his hands in despair and waited for the inevitable disaster. Trying to help the Straw Hats just kept getting harder and harder. In fact, this whole follow your own justice thing that Captain Smoker always talked about wasn't working out so well in practice and he was beginning to wonder if he was going to be able to survive this state of constantly being torn in two. On the bright side, Piers reflected that at least he'd finally gotten to try the famous Bharati food. Briggs was currently perched on the exit of the Navarone archives, watching Commander Shepard go through the records. So Nico Robin was using Shepard's credentials to gather information. He had to admire her resourcefulness. He also noted that Jonathan, despite the cooperativeness displayed earlier in his office, had people shadowing her. Oh, that Jonathan was damn Sakazuki's protege all right. It was an old game to him. Let his suspects think they'd fooled him. Let them think they had a chance to get away. Let them tire themselves out, then, slowly and surely, reel them in when they were at a disadvantage. With Nico Robin, it became a dangerous game. If there was one thing Briggs hated about his full insect form, it was that he was so damn fragile that commonplace things were turned into life and death situations when he transformed. A single careless moment on the floor meant being crushed underfoot by someone who didn't even know he was there. Even small things like flypaper became death traps. Okay, the flypaper wasn't so bad, he could still turn back into his human form and peel it off, but he didn't appreciate the involuntary depilation. It bloody hurt. This disadvantage was even more dangerous against someone who could sprout limbs on any surface, and Briggs had no doubt that if he were to be spotted and recognized by his prey in this form, he was going to be dead before he even knew it. The obvious thing to have done was Nico Robin's ruse to Commander Jonathan earlier, but while he had nothing against Jonathan personally, the man was still one of Sakazuki's camp, and the thought of that bastard's protege getting credit for the capture of the infamous devil child of Ohara, the same woman he had framed for the deaths of the evacuees, made Briggs ill. Hell, no. More importantly, Admiral Aokiji had given him a mission, and capturing Nico Robin wasn't it. Just as he was musing on his next move, vibrations from the wall caught his attention. Something was happening in another part of the base. Probably the other Straw Hats up to no good, but that was no concern of his. At least it wasn't until the backwater fishermen came herring along the passageway, anyway. Briggs recognized the familiar face and wondered what Piers was doing and why the junior officer was in such a hurry. He watched with mild interest as one of Jonathan's men intercepted the junior officer. Sorry, CPO, but you'll have to take another route around. Commander Jonathan gave the order that all personnel were to stay clear of this area until Special Investigator Commander Shepard was done with her inspection. Oh, that Commander Inspector guy, he's checking out stuff here? She's checking out stuff here, the other Marine corrected. Commander Jonathan gave orders to us of the 35th Division to maintain a watch in the meantime. But Commander Shepard's AO right, yeah, her. Of course, I'll find a way around to the infirmary then. With that, the petty officer quickly turned around and ran back the way he came. Briggs frowned. That didn't sound right. In fact, Piers' whole demeanor hadn't looked right at all. He was agitated about something, that was plain, but Briggs could see the telltale signs of a particular emotion on the backwater fisherman. That emotion was guilt. Having been trained in reading body language, he put two and two together fairly quickly. The backwater fisherman must have met Shepard earlier and had thus figured out that this Commander Shepard was an imposter. But if that boy knew, why hadn't he raised the alarm? The intelligence officer recalled the background checks he had done when Smoker had decided to recruit those two back in Logatown. Piers' record had been clean, but Briggs was always convinced that Commander Ripper hadn't been entirely straight with him. And then there was that connection with that bounty hunter turned pirate Roronoa Zoro again. Briggs' expression hardened. Petty Officer Piers was the last person he would have suspected of being a traitor, but last didn't mean never. If that boy turned out to be untrustworthy, then it was Briggs' duty to ensure Smoker was warned of it. He made up his mind. Nico Robin wasn't going anywhere, not without the Straw Hats, anyway. He couldn't complete his mission with all of Jonathan's men hanging about, and he had a bit of time until he made his next move. He decided to shadow the backwater fisherman. Piers ran as fast as he could. The old wounds he had gotten from Alabasta were prickling at the strain, but he ignored the sensation. If Straw Hat Luffy was going to break out Mr. Zoro, the girl hiding in the infirmary had to be warned. There were a pair of guards outside the infirmary doors. Lieutenant Drake had taken precautions that no one would be getting in or out, it seemed. They saw him and saluted. "What is it, CPO?" Piers pulled up and took a moment to catch his breath and quickly made up his mind about what he was going to do. "Straw Hat Luffy is on the loose," he shouted loudly, hoping the sound would carry over to the other side of the infirmary door. He and another pirate with a swirly eyebrow were caught in the kitchens, but they managed to escape from Commander Jonathan. They're probably on their way over to the brig to break out Roronoa Zoro and that other long-nosed pirate we caught in the docks. Fortunately, the two seamen were used to Piers and his tendency of not needing to breathe to talk, so that particular speech of his didn't strike either of them as anything particularly odd. In fact, they seemed to take it as a cue to act on what they perceived to be their duty. "Dr. Kabato, did you hear that? Please let us come in and secure the infirmary. There could be other pirates hiding around here as well," one of them started saying hopefully, while knocking on the door. The infirmary door opened a crack, and Dr. Kabato, looking unusually grim in blood-splattered operating garb, appeared. Piers knew the young doctor well. She had been particularly kind to him during his days as an invalid, back when he had first been transferred to G8. Piers was so startled at the change in her demeanor that he said nothing as the other Marine tried to convince her to let them in. He was just as taken aback as the others when Dr. Kabato suddenly shut the infirmary door without saying anything. He'd been pretty sure that the girl pirate wasn't the type to make trouble, but when a shrill scream, Dr. Kabato's voice, sounded out from the infirmary barely minutes later, Piers suddenly wondered if he hadn't just made a very big mistake by warning the pirate in hiding of what had happened. Cornered people were dangerous. "Dr. Kabato." The other two Marines were futilely hammering at the door, but the door was of sturdy iron and did not budge. Kuina or not, Roronoa Zoro or not, if Dr. Kabato, an innocent, ended up hurt because of his own conflicted loyalties, Piers knew he'd never forgive himself. "We're breaking down that door," he ordered the two. Thankfully, his training with Commander Jonathan had paid off, and the lock, which was not as sturdy as the door itself, did not stand up to the force of their combined battering. The two doors swung open. Dr. Kabato was on the floor, tied up and unconscious. Next to her, also tied up and gagged, was the nurse with orange hair. The pirates escaped through the ducts, she told them as soon as she had regained consciousness. Piers had rushed to Dr. Kabato's side and had been extremely relieved to find the doctor seemingly unharmed. He turned and looked at the nurse. She shrank a little at his inquiring gaze but held the facade. For several moments they said nothing, then Piers, still not taking his eyes off her, motioned that the other two were to go after the pirates. Since he was an officer, the two unhesitatingly obeyed and disappeared into the ducts. "Dr. Kabato?" he asked the bespectacled doctor, who was just coming to. "Are you okay?" "She's all right. She just fainted from the fright," the pirate girl assured him, but she was begging him with her eyes to not to expose her. Oddly enough, it reminded him of the girl who had tried to sneak Zoro food back in Shelltown. Rika. She had looked at him in that same frightened way, before he'd tossed her over the wall for defying the law against assisting Mr. Zoro. "Please make sure no harm comes to her," Piers said at last, then stood up and climbed into the ducts after the two Marines, leaving them alone. A little way in, he stopped and waited. The voices from the room below carried through the thin metal and he could hear the ensuing conversation between the two women, and another male voice. His concern melted away. Once he was satisfied that Dr. Kabato was safe and not under coercion, he made his way after the other two men. "At least I wasn't the only one who thought of pretending to be a hostage," he commented to himself as he resumed his crawl. The rescue was going badly. It didn't help that Luffy had been rendered useless thanks to the sea stone and the Marines had been very prepared for them. As Zoro watched them through the bars, he hoped that the love cook had a plan, because as far as he could tell, it sure looked like the Marines had them on the ropes. As it turned out, Love Cook did manage to get them out, but if someone had told him that the plan would involve some very embarrassing dial switch-ups, foul Luffy generated gas and the ignition of the aforementioned gas causing an explosion, he would have never believed it. In fact, even as they blindly fled the smoke-filled brig, Zoro couldn't resist taking a jab at the Love Cook. "So that your plan to break us out this time? Your standards are slipping, Mr. Prince." Sanji broke out in a storm of swearing. He evidently remembered the stark contrast of this rescue versus the very classy one back in Alabasta. "Shut up, Marimo. Do you think I've got nothing better to do than break you idiots out of prison over and over?" "But seriously, farts, sorry," said Luffy, having recovered his good spirit and thoroughly enjoying their escape. And this was also how no one noticed that Zoro leading until it was too late. Briggs watched with narrowed eyes as Piers crawled out of the ducts and dusted himself off. The ducts had led them out to the walkways on the side of the central tower. Below them were the narrow paths cut into the rock, and far below was the sea, glinting in the afternoon sun. Inwardly, Briggs was seething. The backwater fisherman knew that girl was a pirate. Of course he should have. She had been seen in same group of pirates they had pursued in Alabasta. And yet that idiot had let her escape on purpose. That doctor too. Were so many people in this base in cahoots with those pirates? He didn't have much time to ponder the question, since now that the backwater fisherman was out of the ducts and the other two men were nowhere to be seen, the idiot had taken off at a run again. Briggs knew where he was headed. The docks. Why? To warn the pirates? To help them? To sabotage the efforts of his own side? Briggs frowned. If the boy did do that last thing, there would be no justification, no forgiveness for such a betrayal. He made his decision. The boy was naive beyond belief and an intervention was needed to save him from himself. He dropped down onto Piers' shoulder and spoke into his ear. Piers, what the bloody hell do you think you're doing? At least, that was what Briggs had originally meant to say. Unfortunately, he'd only managed to get to the Piers part when something unexpected happened. The Straw Hats chose that very moment to emerge from another walkway on the same tower. To make matters worse, the idiots in pursuit of the Straw Hat pirates decided it was a great opportunity to be rid of them and fired upon the central tower itself. Briggs did not see that coming, because never in his wildest dreams would he have expected anyone to do anything so incredibly stupid. Regardless, it happened, and the force of the explosion, which was already strong enough to rock the tower itself, was multiplied 100-fold against his insect form, stunning him and knocking him clear over the side of the rocky walkway. By the time he'd recovered his senses, he was mid-fall and the menacing water of the bay below was rising up to greet him. The still disorientated stick insect started fanning his insect wings, but to his horror he discovered that they had been damaged in the blast and did little to slow his fall. In hindsight, he should have allowed himself to hit the water as an insect and use his low mass and the surface tension to keep from going below. Unfortunately, he panicked and instinctively reverted back into his human form, which only sped up his rate of descent. Before he could correct his mistake, he had already plunged into the water and was caught in the cold, paralyzing grasp of the ocean. He couldn't feel his limbs, or even the gritty sand he knew he was covered with. He was pretty sure he'd only lost an arm and that Crocodile hadn't torn off any others, but he couldn't feel the pain anymore even though he should have been able to. Oh, that was really bad. Dehydration? Either that, or his body had reached its limit and was shutting down, which meant he was going to die soon. This was all that stupid white hunter's fault. Getting at him with all that sappy talk about responsibility and protecting their own people. Look at how that had ended up. Here he was, beaten, broken and left to die again, and it wasn't even due to his own misjudgment this time. He should have stuck to his own convictions. People who couldn't get the job done shouldn't be allowed to take on responsibilities they couldn't handle, and if they were inept enough not to recognize when something was beyond their capabilities, they should be left to suffer the consequences. Why had he even bothered to save Toshigi, really? With the bomb about to go off any moment now. Holding Crocodile off so that she could get away had been an exercise in futility. Now, they were all still going to die and he was never going to get to be there and see that bastard's face when he got his comeuppance. A dark shadow passed over the sun. Maybe it showed just how far gone Briggs was. It took him far too long to register that the shadow was a giant bird, and it was carrying a large round object up into the skies above Alubarna. It was only when the skies exploded when Briggs realized that thing was the bomb they had been looking for, and the creature that had been carrying it was a fellow Zone who had deliberately sacrificed himself to save everyone else, including Toshigi, whom Briggs himself had sacrificed so much to save. Who was that Zone? Of course. Now he remembered. One of the generals of Alabasta was purported to be a Falcon Zone or something like that. Despite his own desperate situation, Briggs felt a little of his despair, the bitter heaviness on his spirit, lift in response. What incredible mettle that man must have, to willingly make such a choice and go through with it to the bitter end. Until he had witnessed it for himself, Briggs would have never believed that there were still people like that in the world. But then again, it wouldn't have been the first time he'd been in the wrong about people. "Commander Briggs, sir, can you hear me?" The sting of the salt water was in his throat as Briggs coughed to clear his lungs. Someone had an arm around his neck and was towing him towards the rocky shore. "Piers, good to see you again, sir. Been looking all over for you, didn't expect you to find me first. I saw you fall into the water and dived in after you. Where did you come from, by the way? I didn't see you, but then I heard your voice and you just seemed to appear from nowhere. I guess the explosion knocked you out? You all right now? If you are, I'm gonna let you go so we can both swim for the shore and we can get there faster." "Wait, don't let go, too late." The water closed in over his head as he sank like a rock again. Fortunately, it only took the backwater fisherman a moment or two to realize this, and another few more moments before he had Briggs up and out of the water again. "Are you trying to bloody kill me?" he managed to choke out. "Sorry, sir. I didn't know you couldn't swim. I'm a devil fruit user. Of course I can't swim." "You're a devil fruit user, Piers. That cat was already let out of that bag. As in, months ago." "I was in a coma months ago," Piers pointed out a little petulantly. "Oh, right." Briggs reflected that Tashigi would have told him off for being an insensitive ingrate if she had been there. They reached the shore and Piers dragged his hapless dead weight out of the water. Thankfully, the paralysis drained away quickly and Briggs found he could move again. He sat up shakily. Despite his many years of service, the number of times he'd fallen into the ocean had been very few. He made a point of being extra careful after he'd eaten his devil fruit. "You okay, sir? You look kinda pale." "No, I'm not okay. I nearly drowned because I had to stop you from betraying your own unit and aiding criminals," Briggs snapped before he could stop himself. "I saw what happened in the infirmary, and at the archives too. What the hell were you thinking, Piers? Is this how you repay smokers' trust in you?" Piers paled as Briggs took a few deep breaths. The senior officer looked about to continue his tirade, but then he caught himself. "Damn it, what am I doing? This isn't the time for this. The Straw Hats, did they escape?" Well, they did get out of the prison. Trail their ship. It's at the docks now." Briggs swiveled around to check his surroundings. There was no sign of the ship in the bay, which meant that the Straw Hat pirates hadn't gotten their means of transport back yet. There was still a chance. He'd screwed up just now, but fortunately there was still a possibility that he'd be able to catch up with Nico Robin. "I'll deal with you later. Right now I have a mission to complete. You, get back to the base and stay out of trouble." With that he changed to his hybrid form and sprinted off, leaving a crestfallen petty officer behind. Once the alarm went out that the captain had broken Swordsman San out of the holding cells, Nico Robin decided that it was time to drop any pretense of being Commander Shepard and go. She knew that Vice Admiral Jonathan was no fool, but he really should have known better than to leave her with only a few guards, and none of them with seastone weaponry. As it was, the protesting Marines barely slowed her down and she was able to leave the archives with the maps and other data Ms. Navigator would need to get them to the next island. It was all going so unbelievably well that she was starting to feel a little uneasy. Things never worked out smoothly for her without her having to fight tooth and nail for it. Not in this world that hated her, anyway. Sure enough, a complication to her escape plan appeared. Or rather, she decided to call it out before it had a chance to get the drop on her. "You can come out, Mr. Stick Insect. I know you've been following me. While I'm flattered by the attention, let's be civil about this and talk face to face." Seemingly out of nowhere, the tall figure of a hybrid form zone appeared. "Do you have eyes everywhere, devil child?" Robin smiled mysteriously. "Oh, I never actually managed to catch a glimpse of you, but I noticed your name in the Stan Malay's crew roster. I put 2 and 2 together." "Very clever." Was that sarcasm? No, that was genuine. Most people walk around with their eyes shut and brains asleep and don't see the connections. Flatterer. "Now, I suppose you're after me because of Alabasta? How shall we do this? Another fight? Or can I talk you out of trying to stop me from leaving? If capturing you was all I was after, I would have exposed you back when you were in Vice Admiral Jonathan's office and impersonating Shepard. As powerful as you are, you wouldn't have stood a chance." "Intriguing. I must confess you have me curious now. What you hope to achieve by coming after me, if not vengeance? Don't leave a lady in suspense." The Marine officer was not shy about what he wanted. "I came after you for answers. I want the truth. About Alabasta, and about O'Hara." There was a long pause as Nico Robin digested the Marine's request. Finally she replied. "Normally I would love to stay and chat, but as it happens I can't indulge you on that right now. I have a boat to catch." But Briggs was not so easily dissuaded. "We've fought before and you know now how my power stands in relation to yours. If you want to catch your boat, your best chance lies in humoring me, because if it comes down to a fight, you know as well as I do that I can make sure it's going to be a prolonged one, and you'll definitely miss your boat. And I am supposed to believe that you won't delay me even after I answer your questions? I give you my word, if you answer my questions satisfactorily, I will cease my pursuit of you for now. You could lie. My honor would not allow me to lie in a bargain such as this. Where I come from, we have a saying. Don't lie, or you'll end up like Norland." It was the intensity in his eyes that convinced her. Foo, if you only knew the true story behind that old saying, Mr. Stick Insect. Very well then, let's get this over with. Your questions? What were the O'Harans doing 20 years ago that caused the world government to bust or call their island? The official story was that you were all trying to revive the ancient weapons, was that true? Nico Robin's gaze hardened. No, we did not care for such things. We only wanted to learn about the true history, and not the whitewashed, rewritten propaganda everyone had been spoon-fed. We were scholars, not warhawks. True history. I see. Your scholars defied the law and learned to read the forbidden poneglyphs. As a result, O'Hara was obliterated and the refugee ships were sunk to ensure no knowledge of the poneglyphs would ever escape. A draconian measure by your predecessors. What was in those things that was worth all that sacrifice? Are you sure you want to know, Mr. Marine? Jaguar D. Saul asked that same question and you already know the aftermath? Briggs hesitated, as if pondering what information could be so terrible that it would turn a vice admiral of the Marines against his own organization, and if the obtaining of such information was really worth the risk. Finally he came to a decision. No, not this time. Not from you. But before we proceed any further, there is something I want to say. Briggs trailed off, then took a deep breath. In our previous encounter I believe I accused you of some exceedingly heinous deeds, and the killing of your fellow countrymen in particular. I was misinformed, as in, I had been operating on falsified information and was unaware they were untruths. I apologize. Robin's eyes widened just a little. Then she smiled very slightly. I think you may be the first and only Marine who has ever apologized to me for that, Mr. Stick Insect. The truth behind the O'Hara massacre had been classified. I only happened to come across it because I was specifically seeking the true facts behind the official history. So we're both seekers of the real truth. Perhaps you and I, we are not so different after all. Don't ever compare me with the likes of you. The outburst was so sudden Nico Robin involuntarily took a step back. Briggs knew his face was bristling in indignant anger. He wondered if she could see the disgust burning in his eyes. Her intended compliment having backfired, the former assassin's smile grew cold. And there I was hoping we wouldn't have to continue being enemies. But at least now we see each other plainly. Since you clearly despise me regardless of the true situation behind O'Hara, perhaps I should go. I do not hold you to blame, not for O'Hara, at least. But you clearly resent me for something else. Do you remember Pell the Falcon? The name is familiar. Ah yes, I remember now. The so-called greatest warrior in the kingdom of Alabasta, wasn't he? Well, I suppose standards vary. He's dead, Briggs interrupted bluntly. A flicker of emotion crossed Nico Robin's face. Yes, I do recollect hearing some rumors of it. Such a shame. Despite being unable to defeat me, he really was quite magnificent. Briggs looked at the woman with cold disdain. Did you happen to hear of how he died as well? In case you didn't know, he sacrificed himself carrying Crocodile's bomb out of Alarbarna. The two of us wouldn't be standing here otherwise. Robin raised an eyebrow. My. That is a lot of unexpected sentimentality from you, Mr. Stick Insect. You do surprise me. Is there a point to this questioning? Did you know of Crocodile's bomb beforehand? I was not involved in the preparations for Crocodile's bomb, Robin replied at once. That was not the question I asked you, Briggs persisted. My point is, did you, as Crocodile's right-hand woman, know of the existence of that bomb, with which he planned to blow up an entire city full of people, beforehand? There was a tense silence. For the first time in their confrontation, Robin's gaze dropped. The answer couldn't have been more clear. So you did know? Of course you did. You were there at the top with him, weren't you? There was no way you could have been unaware of that plot even if you weren't directly involved. He paused, disgusted, as the woman made no response. Did you think it a bluff on his part? Was that why you went along with it? Or did you didn't get your hands dirty, then technically it meant you didn't help kill those people? That you needn't be held responsible? Still no answer. I would have thought that you, of all people. Would you like to know what the Alubarna death toll would have been like compared to O'Hara's? As before, it was the mention of her home island that got a response. Just what gives you the right to stand there and judge me? Robin replied, her eyes glinting with the slightest hint of angry tears. You have no right. Not when it was people like you and your predecessors who forced me into such a position in the first place. For a moment it almost seemed like a fight was going to break out, then Briggs backed down. You're right. I'm not the one who has the right to judge you. Robin looked up in surprise. What is that supposed to mean? He ignored her question. You answered my questions, so this is goodbye, Nico Robin. I believe you do have a boat to catch. Just like that? You're letting me walk away? I gave my word? The word of a Marine, what is that even worth? If it was not for the word of a certain Marine, you wouldn't have survived to reach your teens, so clearly it must have been worth something. The woman's expression took on a guarded cautiousness at the hint of his knowledge. She did not say anything further, and left quickly with the aid of her devil fruit powers. Briggs watched her until she was no longer in sight, then checked the walls for good measure. When he was sure he was not being watched, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a den mushi. Did you get all that, sir? Every word. Good work. That was exactly what I needed to decide. If you are interested in intercepting her yourself, I observed the maps Nico Robin appropriated. The next island on the log pose progression is Long Ring Island. The Straw Hats will no doubt be headed there. Ararara. High Command really does undervalue you, Barkskin. Long Ring Island. Eh? That information will be very useful indeed. By the way, how come you didn't try and stop the Straw Hats from leaving with Nico Robin? Briggs shrugged. Oh, too many cooks spoiling the soup and all that. Besides, Smoker would have been disappointed if anyone else besides himself got to the Straw Hats first. Oh, and was that all? Asked the other man shrewdly. Well that, and Commander Jonathan is Sakazuki's protege. They can keep their own damn houses in order without my help. I see. You should know that Shepard lodged a complaint about you. It's already been taken care of. Thank you. Not by me. Captain Tenzo submitted refuting evidence and backed it up with the affidavits of 4 other crewmen. The complaint will most likely be dismissed. In fact, I believe Commander Shepard might actually receive a censure for inaction. A pair of brows shot up. I always knew there was more to that sneaky captain than he let on. I have to say, that report made for interesting reading. What really happened there, Smoker rubbing off on you? Briggs replied sheepishly, maybe just a little bit. Well, whether Nico Robin makes it to Longring Island will depend on how well Jonathan does against the Straw Hats. But you needn't concern yourself with that, Captain. Briggs took a moment to savor the sound of that title again. Your ship, the Pelican, should be waiting for you once you get back to HQ. I also took the liberty of keeping you under Commodore Smoker. Thank you very much, Admiral. By the way, have you seen the latest in the newspapers? I was a little preoccupied, sir. Well, take a look when you get the chance. The North Blue rookies scored a hat trick on the front page today, and that former protege of yours made the headline. Briggs spluttered. That bastard. What has he done now? I'm going to. Hold on to your horses there, Barkskin. I know you plan to go after him, and I understand your desire to take responsibility, but as an admiral I need to warn you not to get too carried away. He's not the only Marine to have ever turned to the other side, and he won't be the last. Remember, there's a war coming. There will be a proper time and place for the chase. Briggs fought the urge to throw down the den and run for the nearest newspaper. Yes, sir. So that weird Marine helped you get away, huh? Zoro asked Nami after the Going Merry had safely escaped from G8 for the second time. Yeah, he did. He was really unusual for a Marine. Who was he? A guy the first knew from back in Shelltown, was Zoro's careful reply. Oh, just like that swordswoman from Alabasta? Kuina's different. This one, well, let's just say he owed me. Then a thought occurred to Zoro. Hey Nami, since he helped you because of his debt to me, we can consider my debt to you paid, then. Nami was not moved. Oh no you don't, I never agreed to cancel your debt in exchange for that. You can't make up that kind of trade without the consent of the other party. But, a little bit of help like that isn't enough to pay for the amount of belly you owe me, Roronoa Zoro. You stingy sea witch. I didn't even use any of it, you just piled up the interest. Oh alright then, Nami suddenly looked magnanimous. Thanks to that guy, I'll reduce your interest rate by 2% from now on. Zoro's response to Nami's offer was something that had Sanji in a rage and rushing to defend his beloved Nami Swan's honor. In the ensuing fight between the swordsman and cook, the strange encounter with the even stranger marine was soon forgotten. Failure. Complete and utter defeat by a tiny crew of pirates. Lieutenant Drake half wished Commander Jonathan hadn't been so calm and supportive about the Straw Hats making such a clean getaway. It only made things worse. He was jolted out of his self-pity by a voice unexpectedly speaking into his ear. I heard that the Straw Hat pirates got away. It's a shame, but personally, I am of the opinion Shepard was the one to blame for bungling up your plans, Lieutenant. Lieutenant Drake jumped in shock and swore at the tall figure who had just appeared out of nowhere. Barkskin, don't sneak up to people like that. Hello, Lieutenant. It's been a while, I know. HQ put me and old Francis in cold storage all the way out in Logatown. Since they've got you stuck here, I guess they did the same to anyone with any kind of connections to that bastard. As much as Lieutenant Drake hated to admit it, it was true. I don't mind it anymore. G8 is a good place to be, and I respect Commander Jonathan greatly. I'm sure you do. Heard from that cousin of yours recently? Nothing in person. The lieutenant looked uncomfortable at the direction the conversation seemed to be heading. I'm very sorry about what happened with the whole Golden Hind incident, Barkskin, but I can't help you find him. I've had no contact with him since that time. The other man raised an eyebrow. You absolutely sure about that? That person is as good as dead to me, the lieutenant repeated for emphasis. Briggs regarded the lieutenant for a moment, then smiled grimly. Oh, he'll be as good as dead soon enough. I'll see to that myself. Nice talking to you, Lieutenant. He walked on for a few paces, then turned around and called out. Oh, have you seen Chief Petty Officer Piers around, by any chance? Piers was waiting for Briggs in the deserted office's quarters, agitatedly pacing like a nervous wreck. Rightly so, considering how stupid the boy had been. Briggs walked over to him and regarded him coolly, arms crossed. Well, Piers, you'll be happy to hear the Straw Hat pirates got away. I do hope you have a good reason for siding with pirates and nearly committing treason, however. Commander Briggs, sir, I can explain. The ever-chatty Piers was stumbling, at a loss for words for once. Captain Briggs, Briggs corrected, and I'm listening. Why were you helping those pirates? Those weren't just any pirates, sir, they were the Straw Hats. Yes, I know they're the Straw Hats. You were the one who called me about it in the first PWAS. So special about them? Briggs tried to sound scornful. But at the back of his mind he couldn't help but remember Alabasta, him lying defeated in the sand, and then finding out later that Straw Hat Luffy had defeated Crocodile, and the pirates had been the ones who had located the bomb. They saved Shelltown from Captain Morgan back in the East Blue when I was still a lowly seaman. Captain Morgan had gone corrupt and power crazy and we were all blindly obeying him. The people of Shelltown suffered because we didn't stop to think for ourselves. If it wasn't for Straw Hat Luffy and Roronoa Zoro defeating him, he might have never stopped. It wasn't justice, sir, and neither was this, or what the higher-ups said to cover up the fact the Straw Hats saved Alabasta. It wasn't right, and I just wanted to put things a little more right. And that's your reason? Yes, sir, said Piers in a small voice. Then he seemed to gather his nerve. I understand what I did went against what I was supposed to do as a Marine, and I'll take whatever punishment I got coming to me. Whatever Commodore Smoker decides. You're going to tell him, aren't you? Briggs was silent for a very long time. Sir, Piers, if there's one thing I hate more than a pirate, it's a Marine who turns traitor. The boy blanched. Sir, I'm still a Marine all the way. I still believe in justice and protecting people. I just did what I thought was right. Real living justice instead of, I don't know, on paper justice. I was just. Briggs raised a hand and cut him off. Being colossally stupid. Looking the other way from time to time is one thing. But going against your own division like you did just now. Did you not know that Commander Jonathan is Admiral Akainu's protege? The same Akainu who melts faces for any infraction of the Marine Code? But Commander Jonathan would never. You damned fool. Do you truly think that if you were caught and it came down to a court-martial, he would overrule his own mentor? If Akainu got wind of what you, in your infinite stupidity, were doing, Briggs brought his face inches away from Piers, you could have been executed on the spot. Worst of all, your actions don't just impact you alone. Did you ever stop to think how your being court-martial led would have reflected on Commodore Smoker? His support of you would mean he'd be affected as well, not to mention the disgrace that blind girlfriend of yours would suffer for just being associated with you. Piers' eyes widened. Clearly it had never occurred to the boy. There is a line you do not cross when you are in the Marines, Piers, because once you do, there is no going back. The next time you put yourself on the line like that for a pirate, I swear, Smoker is going to know every single detail. I will not cover for you again. Again? You mean you're not going to tell Commodore Smoker this time? I'm looking the other way, but only this once, since your intentions were good and you can't seem to help being a naive idiot. Briggs paused, then continued a little less harshly. But you were also the naive idiot who saved me from drowning, so that does count for something. Piers stared at him for a moment, then exhaled in relief. Thank you, sir, and you're welcome. Nice beard, by the way. Briggs' hand self-consciously went to his now fully bearded chin. Yes, Hina wouldn't shut up about plucked turkeys, so I had to regrow the damn thing. He sighed. Anyway, go get your ideas of justice sorted out, say your goodbyes and get ready to move. You're being recalled from G8. There is a war coming and Smoker wants you back. In fact, I think I'd better make sure you depart on the Stan Malay with me once it's fit to sail again. He got up and began walking. Sir, where are you going? Right now? I am going to find myself a bloody damn newspaper. Nico Robin turned the page of the newspaper that had just been delivered by News Coup. Normally she would be poring over it, but today, she found herself blankly staring at the broadsheet without reading it. If it was not for the word of a certain Marine, you wouldn't have survived to reach your teens, so clearly it must have been worth something. She frowned. That irritating stick insect man had been poking around, digging for information on her past. I should have snapped his neck when I had the chance, she reflected to herself as she gave up on trying to read and put the paper away. He knew too much. She would come to regret missing that opportunity much later. After the incident at G8 had become an old story to laugh over, and the Straw Hats had emerged from a Davy back fight victorious and with their guards down, he appeared. After the ensuing disastrous confrontation and escape, a few of the Straw Hats had wondered how Admiral Aokiji had known where to find them but never came to a conclusion. Although she never told, Robin on the other hand, knew exactly who had set that man on her trail, and what the little encounter in Navarone had really been a prelude to. The newspaper just arrived. Lady Kuina, who had been busily engaged in the activity of maintaining her swords, smiled up at Koza and laid the two weapons down on the low table before her. She could sense that Koza was eyeing Pel's sword. He had probably recognized the distinctive blade and was wondering how she had come into the possession of it. Has there been any interesting news, Koza-san? She asked by the way of redirecting his attention back to the topic. Oh right. The news. Let's see. There was the crackling of paper. In the short time since she had moved to Akari, it had become something of a daily ritual for Koza to drop by Kuina's quarters and read the news to her. She was sure Vivi had asked him to. Chaka used to do the same for her back in Alubarna, and the princess had no doubt guessed that Kuina would be feeling lonely and left out of the loop otherwise. I'm not sure if it would interest you. The front page is all about a bunch of big-shot rookie pirates. Not the Straw Hats. No, these guys are all from the North Blue, it seems. Hawkins the magician, terrified survivors described him as inhuman nightmare monster that would not die. Kuina reflected that devil fruit users were so much more common in the Grand Line, and she would really have to train harder to be able to take them on once she was back with her crew. There was also an incident involving North Blue rookie Trafalgar Law, better known as the Surgeon of Death. Hospital staff were left in a state of hysteria despite suffering absolutely no casualties. That's really strange. I wonder what that man did to cause such a panic. It's low of them to attack a hospital, though, even if they are pirates. Kuina reflected that Dr. Francis would have had some very choice words to say about anyone who didn't respect the sanctity of hospitals if he had been there. She hoped the old doctor was doing well. She hadn't heard from him for ages. "Oh, there's something here you might be interested in. It involves the Marines." "Well, not quite, but the person in question apparently used to be a Marine." Whoever wrote this article really doesn't like deserters. The language they're using is really harsh. I really hope this guy is not anyone you know, Lady Kuina. He seems to have killed a lot of people. "I joined the Marines only very recently, Koza-san, so it is very unlikely," Kuina assured him. "I might recognize the name though. What's he called?" "From Ensign Toshigi." 2. Captain H.C. Briggs, congratulations on your captainship and being put in command of the Pelican. When T-Bone Sensei got the news, he was so overcome with emotion he burst into tears and needed several minutes to compose himself before he could continue with training. "I heard from Smoker-san that Pierce-kun is back with the crew. That's great news. I hope he really is all right after what happened in Alabasta. I also heard that you're being sent to Akari Island to retrieve Kuina. Speaking of Kuina, can you believe that girl went and damaged that beautiful sword of hers fighting against some 50 million bounty head? I got a letter from her asking about swordsmiths in the Marines just recently. The poor blade must be crying at such mistreatment. Oh, I have to say I was really surprised to get your inquiry about that special request. I thought you'd given up on swords in general and especially that one in particular. Your idea is rather exciting, and I've included my recommendations in the diagram here. The material you requested is rather difficult to source, but you should be able to get some if you submit the following requisition order to Quartermaster Skinflint. Fortunately, I happen to know the weaponsmith who did smokers, so I think something can be arranged once you get the material. By the way, T-Bone sends his congratulations, Toshigi. From Captain H.C. Briggs to Ensign Toshigi. Dear Ensign Toshigi, I trust your training with Captain T-Bone has been fruitful. I have been instructed by Commodore Smoker to take the Pelican to Akari Island where Petty Officer Kuina is to rejoin the crew. Chief Petty Officer Pierce is already on board and has assumed the role of navigator. I have also received further instructions to discuss with you the arrangement for your reintegration into the crew of the Pelican upon the conclusion of your training with Captain T-Bone. I have already checked with him and attached with this communication the schedule and itinerary. Please be ready for pickup from Water 7. Regards, Captain Briggs. From Ensign Toshigi to Captain H.C. Briggs. Briggs, so the crew is getting together again? That's great. As much as I've enjoyed training with T-Bone, I would like to see everyone again, and I'd certainly love to see some real action. We've not had much pirate activity here. By the way, what's with the formality all of sudden? Toshigi. From Captain H.C. Briggs to Ensign Toshigi. Dear Ensign Toshigi, this is nothing personal. Just please be advised that as a captain, I have to maintain proper decorum when in communication with crew members. Regards, Captain Briggs. From Ensign Toshigi to Captain H.C. Briggs. Proper decorum. I don't recall Smoker acting like he had to stick up his unmentionables when he made captain. Whatever the reason, please drop it when you're talking to a friend. Toshigi. From Captain H.C. Briggs to Ensign Toshigi. Toshigi, please don't be so sensitive. I do consider you a most esteemed colleague. By the way, I really need your help with Quartermaster Skinflint. The man has an unreasonable grudge and has blocked my requisition order 5 times in a row for no particular reason. Signed, Captain H.C. Briggs. From Ensign Toshigi. 2. Captain H.C. Briggs, esteemed colleague, if that is how it is, I would tell you to find instead someone you actually consider a friend to do you any favors about that requisition request of yours. Captain Barkskin, sir. Signed, Ensign Toshigi. From Captain H.C. Briggs. 2. Ensign Toshigi. Is something wrong? I've not received any responses to my last 3 letters to you. Please get back to me as soon as you can. Signed, Briggs. From Captain H.C. Briggs to Ensign Toshigi. Toshigi, if you're mad at me, at least say so. Signed, Briggs. From Captain H.C. Briggs to Captain Tenzo. Dear Captain Tenzo, need to cash in on a favor. Can I impose on you for any blackmail material you may have on Quartermaster Skinflint? Signed, Captain Briggs. From Captain Tenzo to Captain H.C. Briggs. Captain Briggs, I've sent with this letter what I have. By the way, heard about the ensign. I would recommend a peace offering. Normally flowers would work, but in her case, maybe something more personalized to show you do pay attention. Signed, Captain Tenzo from Captain H.C. Briggs. 2. Captain Tenzo. To set the record straight, Ensign Toshigi and I are merely professional colleagues with a mutual respect for each other. Signed, Captain Briggs from Captain Tenzo to Captain H.C. Briggs. Sure you are. Signed, Captain Tenzo. The Pelican was not a new ship by any means, but it was certainly more impressive in size compared to Smoker's little brig with which they had previously sailed into the Grand Line. The faithful little vessel had been sent back to Logatown for refits, and in the meantime, her crew had been transferred to the Pelican. It was no coincidence that they had been given a warship either. The rumors had been flying thick and fast amongst the ranking officers, whispers of the appointment of a new warlord of the sea. A high-profile capture that was being kept under wraps, and most of all, war with one of the Yonkou imminent. The lower ranks of the Marines remained blissfully uninformed for now, but those who were aware of the rumors had started making preparations. Commodore Smoker knew this well, which was why he'd sent the newly reinstated Captain Briggs to regather the original crew who had come with him from the East Blue. When uncertainty loomed on the horizon, it was always best to have men you could trust by your side. Akari Island up ahead, Captain Navigator Piers reported as they approached. There's something off about the dock area. Captain Briggs peered through his spyglass and snorted. Off is a bloody understatement, Mr. Piers. Those are pirate ships anchored there, all hands on deck. True to the captain's observation, the crew could make out the fleet of 3 pirate ships as the Pelican drew closer. They could also see that there was some sort of fighting going on in the docks, although whoever was fighting the pirates didn't seem to be visible from where they were. The pirates had evidently spotted them, however. The crew of the rearmost ship could be seen desperately trying to turn around so their cannons would be facing the approaching warship. The crew of the Pelican wasn't about to give them the chance. At the command of their captain, the front cannon opened fire, and the pirate ship was rocked by a direct hit from their upgraded artillery cannons. All activity on board the other ship halted as the pirates diverted their attention to the very large and very gaping hole that had appeared in their hull. Good. Move on to the next ship. Someone get a Den Den Mushi and try to contact Petty Officer Kuina. She can't be unaware of what's going on, Briggs ordered the nearest crewman before turning his spyglass back to the first pirate ship to make sure that that group were out of the fight. Yeah, they're dead in the water with that strike. Target the next ship. Piers looked concernedly at the distant battle. We should be careful with our shots, sir. Miss Kuina could be on one of the ships and we don't want to be firing on one of our own. I don't think we need to worry about your lady swordsman, Piers, Briggs said blandly as he continued peering through his spyglass. He had apparently seen something interesting through it, for he gave a little sound that was something between a snort and a chuckle. Possible friendly sighted, sir, the ship's lookout shouted. A split second later, one of the second pirate ship's lifeboats was sent flying away to smack into the first sinking pirate ship. The thrower of lifeboats turned out to be a tall man who seemed to be charging through the air, leaving mysterious contrails behind him. The pirates around him were madly firing at him as he sent them tumbling with powerful punches, but it seemed that none of their shots were even coming close to finding their thaki, was Briggs' nonchalant comment at the display. That must be that mystery hockey teacher Smoker mentioned. Ah, hello, look who finally decided to show up. The mast of the second pirate ship gave a groan as he said this, and came crashing down into the water, having been cleanly cut into 2. Piers felt a sense of overwhelming déjà vu at the sight. It was just so reminiscent of that time he and Kuina had run into Mahak back at the Barati. Then his jaw dropped. Standing on the bow of the pirate ship was a familiar figure. She was clad in a striking kimono which was white and trimmed with blue, as per navy colors, and sported the symbol for justice on the back. In her hand she carried an unfamiliar sword which was far larger and warlike compared to her old shikomizu. In astonishment, Piers stared as Kuina calmly sidestepped the shot after shot from the pirates, almost as though she could see them coming. Miss Kuina, he blurted out in amazement. At the sound of his voice, Kuina whirled around, her face lighted up in delight. Unfortunately, the exclamation was ill-timed, for even as she turned, He spotted a nearby pirate who took it as an open invitation to shoot the distracted swordswoman. His heart sank at the realization of his own stupidity. "Miss Kuina. Watch out." Piers was already halfway over the railing, ready to jump overboard and swim the distance between the two ships to go to her aid even though he knew he would be too late. As it turned out, however, it was quite unnecessary. Before he could take his shot, the pirate stumbled back, as the loud crack of a rifle firing rang over the water. The pirate collapsed backwards, a red splatter spurting from his shoulder. "Should have spent more of that time in G8 practicing your marksmanship, Piers," Briggs remarked, lowering his rifle. "Fat lot of good knuckle dusters are going to be doing for your attempts to impress that girl of yours. You'd be better off getting a gun." "Hoi, Petty Officer Kuina. Don't get sloppy," he turned and yelled to the figure on the other ship. "I don't like guns, sir," Piers replied evenly as Kuina, not missing a beat, charged into the ranks of the remaining pirates. Briggs snorted. "Still like that, are you? So naive." He gestured at the pirate ship, and then at the quicksilver form of the swordswoman, who was dealing with the remnants of resistance with little hesitance. "Buck up, Piers. Your girl's got the measure of things better than you." With that, Briggs took aim and drilled another bullet into another unfortunate pirate. A second later, another body fell onto the deck of the pirate ship. There was a hard glint in Briggs' eye that Piers found slightly uncomfortable at seeing as he turned and spoke again. "There's no room for the sentimental, Piers. Not for what's coming up in the oceans ahead." "Oh, they weren't anything to worry about really," Briggs reported to Smoker later. "Just a bunch of pirates with a bone to pick with the resort. Something about the leader having been turned away previously. How pirates that stupid managed to survive on the Grand Line is beyond me," growled the Commodore. He sounded stressed, probably because Briggs wasn't there to do all the administrative work anymore. "Numbers," Briggs answered immediately, not bothering to keep the smugness out of his voice. 3 ships to deal with a commercial hot springs resort would have been overkill in any other circumstances. Of course they weren't factoring in hockey users. "Speaking of hockey, what's your assessment of Kuina?" It was obvious that the blind girl had gained a good grip on her observation hockey, and Briggs promptly told Smoker as much. "Very combat capable. I almost forget she's blind from time to time. Toshigi will have some work catching up with her." Which brought conversation around to the one person Briggs really didn't want to talk about at the moment. Naturally, Smoker charged into it like a bull to the red cape. "What the hell has been up with you and Toshigi, anyway?" "Nothing. She's just being a moody." He caught himself before he finished the sentence. "No, that wasn't true, or fair. We may have had a disagreement," he admitted with resignation. "That damn bloody stubborn sword nut and her silent treatment." Of course, Smoker, king of insensitivity, surliness, and brash thoughtlessness, proceeded to rub it in his face. "Just fix it. It's getting tiring, having to deal with you two being like that." "Sir, yes sir," Briggs grumbled, putting the receiver down on the Den Mushi with unnecessary vim, and scaring the lights out of the poor snail. He stalked over to his desk, filled out a short form, and sent it off. He then exited the captain's cabin to see Piers and Kuina pass on the way from the women's quarters, the former having just helped the latter with her luggage. "No, I don't think of it as a bad thing. I mean, I've got cool scars all over my back now," the backwater fisherman was saying to the girl. "Well, not as cool as yours, but still pretty good." Kuina laughed. "You really haven't changed much, Piers-san. You're the only person I know who could make scars sound like a positive thing." Briggs rolled his eyes, noting that on hearing the girl's words Piers' ears had turned red and an extremely goofy-looking grin had appeared on his face. It was so incredibly annoying Briggs felt inclined to wipe it off for him. "I'm not ashamed of my battle scars, Miss Kuina. Or scared of getting more. I promised back in Logatown, didn't I? I'll go with you wherever you want to go. From now on, I'll be there, and I'll always have your back." Suddenly he felt an overwhelming urge to strike something. "Navigator Piers, please remember you have a job to do. Set course to Water 7 first, comparisons of scar tissue, later." His voice came out colder than intended. A part of Briggs told him he was being a killjoy, but he didn't care. He'd had enough to deal with today without being reminded of ghosts of old conversations. "Yes, Captain Briggs." Piers jumped to attention, flustered. "I'll get to it right away." Briggs was left facing a slightly awkward Kuina in short order. Captain Briggs. There was a quizzical tone in her greeting. Damn it, girl had observation hockey. She'd have noticed the sudden spike of killing intent from him. With an effort he calmed himself. He would not unravel as soon as he returned to command just because of a memory of that man. Not now, when justice was within grasp again. Petty Officer Kuina. Good to see you haven't been wasting your time in Alabasta. Nice new replacement sword, I approve. He cast his eye over the rest of her ensemble. Much more warlike. I can't say that outfit looks practical, however. It will not impede my performance in battle, sir. See that it doesn't. Once you get set up, you'll be assuming your new duties as an officer. I put you in charge of the crew's sword training sessions for the duration of our voyage. For your information, this is the same role Ensign Toshigi previously conducted. Yes, sir. The girl looked rather surprised but pleased at this. Pierce tells me that we're on our way to meet up with Toshigi-san. Will I be continuing the trainings even after she has returned? It'll be up to her, Briggs responded, trying not think about how outraged Toshigi was going to be when she found out. By the way, you'll have to report to Med Bay for your medical, which is overdue since you were in Alabasta. I have no doubt Dr. Francis will be pleased to see you. It's wonderful to see you again, Kuina girl. I love your new uniform, very elegant. The infirmary of the Pelican was much bigger than the one aboard Smoker's brig. Her medical checkup had proceeded smoothly. The good doctor had been even more cheerful than usual. Kuina soon found out why. I'll be retiring after this tour of duty. It's personal stuff, family stuff. Oh, don't worry, it is good news. And I'm getting old, he admitted ruefully. It's time I spent what was left of my time with my daughter and soon-to-be family. See, my daughter Marie, she is getting Marion's. Thank you, thank you. Kuina was very sure Dr. Francis was beaming as he said this. She could practically feel the pride radiating off him. I have to say, it's been a good few months to see all my patients back and up on their feet. Pierce seems to be doing well, too. Even that old stick bug isn't that much worse off. It's a royal pain having to search for a good replacement doctor, however. But I'll let Smoker and Briggs worry about that one. You'll likely get some fresh-faced greenhorn with barely enough practical experience to qualify. I hope he takes proper care of you all too. Not easy to find an experienced practitioner who wants to serve as a ship's doctor, you know. Smoker-san was most fortunate to have you assigned to Logatown then, Dr. San, Kuina said with a smile. There was a slight hesitancy in the doctor's response that Kuina couldn't quite interpret. Well, I wouldn't say that, Kuina girl. Let's just say we were both quite lucky and leave it at that. If you say so. Where will you be going after you retire, Dr. San? Back to my hometown in the Sabaody archipelago. Serving in the East Blue is peaceful and all, but it was all getting rather tame for a Grand Liner like me. Even my time serving the North Blue I considered tame, so you can imagine how it was like in the East. I nearly went mad treating soldiers for sunburns, especially when Smoker had his reign of terror in Logatown. The doctor proceeded to tell several long-winded tales of Smoker's exploits before she had arrived in Logatown, and of how he had almost single-handed kept any pirates from the East Blue from reaching the Grand Line. Kuina listened in interest. She'd always known Smoker-san was a force to be reckoned with, of course, but it was very interesting nevertheless. And then he said to the pirate, "Not in my town. Oh, I'm rambling again, Kuina girl. Why didn't you stop this chatty old man from taking up so much of your time?" "I don't mind. I will miss listening to your rambling. Well, let's hope that Smoker-san manages to find a good replacement to take care of us, and for a smooth last voyage to Sabaody for you, Doctor." Much to her surprise, the doctor laughed at this. "Don't take it the wrong way, Kuina, but I forgot how it was like to be so young and optimistic." "What do you mean? We're on the Grand Line here, and I know better than to expect such impossible things." Dr. Francis chuckled a little bit, then added a little more somberly, "It's in the news, Kuina girl. Mark my words, the world is changing. We have rough sailing coming up ahead." Kuina was discovering the hard way that being a good swordsman and being a good teacher of swordsmanship were not necessarily inclusive of each other. She had thought that training her fellow Marines would be something that would come naturally to her, being the daughter of a dojo master and all. Unfortunately, her entire training session was turning out to be a bit of a shambles. "Sorry ma'am, I don't understand," the Marine before her sounded bewildered. "But I'm doing exactly what you told me to do." No you're not, if you couldn't cut through the dummy, that means you're holding your wrist the wrong way. She demonstrated the correct grip. You see now? The sword needs to line up with your hand and arm. When you make the cut, you must have time. Everything must line up in a harmonious movement or the blade will not cut properly. She might as well have been speaking a different language. The seaman exuded utter confusion. Sue. I just need to make sure my hand's always straight. I don't know how to make them understand. She ranted to Piers later when they were both off duty and sharing a meal in the officers' section of the galley. Piers was most sympathetic. Well, no one gets good at something right away, do they, Miss Kuina? He said thoughtfully. I mean I know your dad was an instructor and all but teaching ain't exactly the same thing as doing, and he only ever really taught you sword fighting and not sword teaching, if you get my drift. So maybe you just need more practice at the sword teaching part. The answer was so sensible it took Kuina by surprise. Then her frustration melted away at once because it made so much sense. She smiled. I really don't know what I'd do without you, Piers. You really do know how to make anyone feel better about anything. Piers sounded very pleased at her praise. You're welcome, Miss Kuina. I'm just glad we're back on the same ship again, Miss Kuina. I mean, G8 was very nice and all, but it still doesn't beat going on adventures with you again. There was a pause where he seemed to be looking furtively around. As it was off hours, their corner of the galley was quite deserted. By the way, there's a bit of news I've been meaning to tell you. You met Zoro in G8? Kuina repeated in amazement after he had finished. She could barely believe the coincidence. And Zoro and the Straw Hats escaped on a flying octopus? It's hard to believe, I know, Piers said, but that really happened. They both had a good laugh at that. Kuina smiled and gave Piers a friendly nudge. I just want to say, Piers-san, that I am extremely grateful to you for helping him escape, though I know it cannot have been easy. You truly are a great friend. Piers seemed startled at this, but he also seemed very happy and said, You too, Miss Kuina. You don't know how much meeting you changed my life. If it weren't for you, I'd been killed back in Logatown. But instead I'm here in the Grand Line and having adventures and helping you, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Then a thought seemed to occur to him. By the way, Zoro and me had a talk while we were running away from the base security, and he said something that, well, I've been thinking about a lot. He suddenly tensed up, as if mentally gathering himself. Actually, I had a lot of time to think about things while I was in G8. I mean, first I was stuck in bed and after that I did a lot of fishing with Commander Jonathan, and fishing makes me think a lot, and then when Zoro said that thing he said, it got me thinking, and I decided if I got the chance again I was going to be man about it and just get it out. He gulped out hurriedly. Oh no, I'm prattling again, and Lieutenant Drake said it makes me sound like an idiot when I keep talking and talking, but I really want to be honest about my feelings and I need to say it now or I'll lose my nerve. Kuina was genuinely concerned for her friend at this point. She could sense he was extremely agitated. Are you all right, Piers-san? Piers took a deep breath. Miss Kuina, you ever had feelings for someone but you never did anything about it, or said anything, then something happened and it was only when it was too late, when you realized you'd been an idiot and should have done it when you had a chance. And then the chance was gone. His words were like a trigger to Kuina. Suddenly, she was back in Alubarna, the screams of war in her ears and a sword clasped in her hands. Do not grieve over much. Pell was smiling at her. She could feel the warmth of it even in her memory of the moment. It will be all right. I will not let everyone die. Instead he had died for everyone, and had done so never knowing. Yes, Piers, I know the feeling very well. She came back to the present with a grimace and was suddenly aware that she had Pell's sword tightly clasped in her hands, just as she had back on that fateful day. Why you do? He seemed rather eager for more explanation, so she elaborated. It was back in Alubarna, after the ship had been attacked and you were. She trailed off, unable to finish her sentence. I went after the men whom I thought had killed you. I was going to kill them. I was going to kill them slowly and make them suffer until they died. I nearly lost myself in all that hate, but someone stopped me before I became a monster. Piers seemed a bit taken aback. I didn't know about that part, Miss Kuina. I'd hate for you to have done something you'd regret just because of me. But I'm kinda glad touch. He paused and seemed on the verge of saying something. She could sense his hesitation. Well, it's a good thing that person stopped you, then, he said finally. Kuina sighed. I know, but the part that hurts most is that that person is dead. He died in the war. And there were many things I would have liked to say to him, to thank him properly, and Elle will never get the chance to say them now. It did still hurt, thinking of what could have been. I'm sorry to hear that, Miss Kuina. Piers seemed at a loss on how to react to her confession. You know, we don't have to talk about this. It's upsetting you. Desperate for a topic other than the emotional minefield he had inadvertently walked into, he started talking about the first thing in his line of sight. Why don't we talk about your new sword instead? It's really nice. Who gave it to you? Her smile was bitter, despite herself. Pell the Falcon. The hero of Alabasta himself? Serious? That's so frickin' cool. I read about him in Captain Briggs' report about how he saved the city from that bomb by sacrificing himself and something seemed to click in Piers' mind. I see now, Pell the Falcon was the guy who stopped you. Yes, she replied. I'm so sorry to heard that, Miss Kuina. It must have been really hard when you heard that he'd. I was there when it happened. And yes, I know for sure he is dead. I was the one who found his body afterwards, out in the sands. Perhaps she'd let more of her emotions show than she had intended. Piers suddenly went silent. Piers being silent was such an unnatural and unnerving thing, that Kuina immediately felt a sense of alarm. She tried to break the silence. I'm sorry, Piers. We've gone and forgotten about what you were going to say after talking to Zoro, she prompted. But he didn't seem eager to talk about that now. Piers, it's okay, tell me. She reached out her hand to catch his, but any words Kuina might have said to try and convince him died in her throat as a self-conscious cough broke the silence. She jumped with a start, suddenly realizing they were no longer alone. She'd been so preoccupied she'd failed to notice the presence of Captain Briggs at the door. It's okay, Miss Kuina, Piers said hurriedly, strangely downcast. I don't think it's a good time to talk about that now. I need to go check on the Den Mushis, he added, getting up without another word. But Piers was gone, and she was left alone with Captain Briggs, who was radiating disapproval. There was the crinkling sound of newsprint coming from the captain's direction. Of course, he must have come for the daily newspaper. Good evening, Captain Briggs, she began politely, still trying to comprehend what had just happened, but his cold voice cut her off. Kuina, he said sharply, you're an idiot. Without another word or explanation, he turned on his heel and left, leaving Kuina alone in the mess hall, utterly confused at what she had done to offend both men. Captain Briggs sat at his desk, ostensibly doing his reports, but in reality, he was fuming and his mind was on anything but the trivial little errands Marine High Command had sent him on, or the silly little dramas taking place all over his ship. He glared at the paper, freshly delivered by the news crew. That bastard had been at it again, and there was his smug face, plastered over the front page of the paper, in that stupid, tacky get-up that made Briggs wonder what the hell the idiot was even thinking. Damn it all. There was a time when deducing what was going on in that man's head would have been a second nature to him, but now. A knock on his cabin door interrupted his thoughts. A young Marine entered on his command, carrying a long narrow parcel. A delivery from the quartermaster arrived for you, Captain. Oh, and you also have a letter, and a written message from Officer Piers from the communications room. Thank you, Seaman Worf, he said idly, putting his paper aside. My saber. I've been expecting that. You may leave the deliveries in the corner and resume your duties. After Seaman Worf left, Briggs carefully slipped on a pair of gloves, unwrapped the parcel, and examined the reworked saber. Satisfied, he drew the blade, then idly glanced at the message that had accompanied the delivery. From Quartermaster Skinflint to Captain H.C. Briggs. Your requisition and work order has been approved and completed. Please keep your end of the agreement as promised. The following items have been dispatched to you with this communication. 2 units weapons grade Seastone, new requisition. Navy Sabre modification work order confirmation report, expedited. 1 unit Navy Sabre, pre-owned, maker. Piranha Swordsmith, North Blue, engraved with letter B on guard. 1 unit leather scabbard for Navy Sabre, with inscription. What a load of rubbish, he said aloud in disgust at reading the rest of the message. On a whim, he ripped the note in 2 and tossed it aside in favor of drawing the weapon. Very, very nice work. Maybe he ought to have a few rounds with Toshigi when he got back on board. He hadn't used swords for a while, he was bound to be rusty. What's a load of rubbish? Briggs started and swore as he turned around. Dr. Francis was at the door. Don't you knock, he remarked acidly. Meant to, but the door was ajar and opened when I tried. What's a load of rubbish, Stickbug? That's Captain Briggs to you, Francis, Captain Stickbug. Briggs glared at the defiant doctor. The doctor had never been intimidated by rank when Smoker was in command, and that hadn't changed. The damnable thing was he could get away with it too, doubly so now that Briggs was in charge. Even the sight of Briggs with a saber in hand didn't seem to daunt him. You sound unusually happy, Francis, he commented, gritting his teeth and letting it slide. Retiring soon and my daughter's getting married. Everything an old man could ask for. By the way, Dr. Bones just sent me a nagging letter. You're overdue for your checkup. I already know you're not going to come down to the infirmary to get it done on your own volition, so here I am to make sure you're sound. There's no need, Francis. My arm's fine now. It's all regrown and I'm still. Ain't talking about your arm. I know it grows back fine. I found that out the first time that happened. Remember? I'm talking about that other wound of yours. I assure you, I made a full recovery from the broken ribs. Dr. Francis made a sound that sounded like, PFFT, don't play dumb with me. You're not the only one here who reads the news, Barkskin. The tension in the room suddenly shot up. It was a while before Briggs broke the silence. Stay out of my affairs, Francis, and I'm fine. I'll come for my physical when I'm done here. Stubborn stick bug, Dr. Francis grumbled as he turned to leave. He stopped, then stooped down to pick up a piece of torn paper lying by his feet. With alarm, Briggs realized that of all the people on the ship, Francis was probably the only one who would understand the significance of it. Hey, too late. Dr. Francis read the last part of the ripped note out loud. Saber, with inscription. Always had my back. Remember I've got yours. The old doctor turned to look at him, then shook his head. It's as I thought. He was the one who gave you that sword, wasn't he? What are you planning to do? Run him through with it when you find him? Briggs didn't answer. The doctor suddenly lost his trademark surly look, and his expression changed to one of concern he normally reserved for the ladies in the crew. Look, Briggs, it's not my place to say so, not after what he did to you. But hunting him down and killing him to get your revenge isn't going to make it better. You're right, it's not in your place, Francis. Briggs sheathed the sword, put it behind his desk. And you're wrong. It's not about vengeance. It's about responsibility. I created a monster. And I'm going to make sure my mistake is no longer allowed to run wild in the new world. Tell yourself now? The scorn in his voice was grating. That's what it is. Briggs projected as much force in his voice as he could. There was another moment of silence before Francis spoke again, but when he did, he didn't sound convinced. Fine. But I'm warning you, don't get the others caught up with your revenge. You're the one Smoker put in charge of this ship, and you have those kids and Tashigi to watch out for, Captain. With that, the doctor left, still bristling. Damn that old man, Briggs thought in annoyance. Just because he knew. Just because he thought he knew his history, he presumed he had the right to interfere. And he'd even assumed Briggs would neglect his duties just because of that bastard. No, as much as he wanted that, he understood that he was the captain of the ship, and he owed Admiral Aokiji and Commodore Smoker that much. He had a responsibility towards the safety of his crew. Even if that damned Tashigi was being so difficult right now. He retrieved the letter Seaman Wharf had left with his parcel. He already knew what it was, of course, but it didn't hurt to confirm its contents. Sure enough, it was the confirmation of his peace offering arrangement with Tashigi. From Tiki's mail order gift service to Captain H.C. Briggs. Dear Captain Briggs, thank you for your purchase of the following items. 1 unit. The new, updated and comprehensive history of the Maitu, limited edition with full color plates. The listed items will be sent by express delivery to your requested address as soon as possible. We value your business. You'd better be right about this, Tenzo, he groused to himself. Then he picked up the last note, which was from Piers. It was a transcript of a message that had been dictated through Den Den Mushi. After the blind girl's cluelessness, the poor besotted backwater fisherman was probably on duty on moping in there. At least he was making himself useful. He scanned the note header and sat up when he noticed it was a message from Tashigi. Perhaps she was finally done with the silent treatment and the peace offering would not be needed after all. Before he could start reading in earnest, there came a frantic rapping at the door. What now? It was Private Worf again. The command just came in from Admiral Aokiji's Golden Den Mushi. Sir, he's called for a buster call. A buster call? From Admiral Aokiji? After reading Aokiji's account of Ohara, he found it difficult to believe that a man like Aokiji would call for something so drastic out of the blue. The target? Briggs kept up appearances, but inwardly his mind was racing. Eni's lobby. Are you sure? Why yes, sir. Aokiji Buster calling one of the world government's own bastions of order? What the bloody hell was going on? Tell Navigator Piers to set a course for Eni's lobby. Briefing of all crew in half an hour. Go. Something big was going on. He frowned to himself. As important as it was to be prompt, detouring to pick up Tashigi wouldn't be a half-bad idea. If there was trouble brewing in Eni's lobby, it would be reassuring to have her on hand to help. Water 7 wasn't that far away, and T-Bone would be there too. He picked up the message from Tashigi again. Any thoughts about that, whether that was a good idea to go pick her up, died in a realization of horror on reading the actual content of her message. 2. Captain Briggs will not be at Water 7. Captain T-Bone's unit has been assigned to escort C-Train to Eni's lobby. Please reroute for pickup there. From Ensign Tashigi.